Traders, welcome back to the channel. We're going over the SP 500, the Nasdaq 100, exactly how we move today, things you need to be looking at on the market, and how you can be looking at this going forward. Is the crash over? Are we looking to go down further? You're actually getting alerts as we speak right now. Before we get into that, I ask you to do two things. Consider liking and subscribing. I'm giving you videos every single day about how the stock market is moving, non-biased as well, giving you the factual data and all the news in between. Let's get to it. Now, what I'm going to do is show you this chart, but the first thing I want to say is going into tomorrow. You have consumer confidence coming out very early in the morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. I believe it's going to be 9 a.m. Central for myself personally. So 30 minutes basically into market open, you get that data. Going into Wednesday, this is the big boy data. This is what everyone's been waiting for. This is going to be telling us a lot about what's happening and the recession to come, if it is still quote unquote to come. Now, GDP, this is coming out 8:30 going into market open on Wednesday. Very big going on there. That's what everyone's going to be looking at. You're going to have a lot of commentary going on this as well. We need to be looking at that. So going into this, what's happening and how are we moving on the Nasdaq and indexes? I think it's really, really clear. When you're looking at how we moved, now when we look at Nasdaq opens up, the futures open up Sunday evening. So it's going to give you a pretty good look at what's happening. So when I said going into Friday, I said I anticipate you're going to come up and test the 12.25 to 12.3 area. It's a very big zone that we have mentioned. If you zoom back out, you can see this was our previous level where there was a lot of resistance there as well. And look what happened going into this morning, very early on, basically London session. You came into about 12.25, getting rejected, and then at market open for New York. What happened? Boom, straight down. Now what's going on here? I want to look at SPY, just give you a better visual. You may look like you're trending down or you're getting some downside pressure, but I would argue you're getting nothing. And I know you're thinking to yourself, Tyler, what do you mean I'm getting nothing? You're basically just waiting on that data to be released tomorrow. If you look at what's happened today, you opened up at basically 391, instantly down to 387, 388. And that was really the move that you were going to be able to trade. You got a little bit of upside moving back to that weekly, the opening level, and then you came back down, back and forth, back and forth. But overall, if you're trading anything on the Friday or weekly contracts, or you're trading 0 DTE, in my opinion, unless you're getting perfect entries, you're not really making that much on these moves. So, and you can also try to trade this, but just the range you're trading in, I don't like it because it's just moving so slow throughout the day. Now, if we go back to this NQ chart, this is Nasdaq, and this is going to be the most important chart because something very interesting is happening here. Now, I'm making this video right now. It's still about 2 hours left in the day. I don't anticipate any crazy movement going into the end of the day. I anticipate more chop. But essentially what's happening is you're coming down to this bottom level down here, 1203, and then you're coming back up to that weekly level where you started the day right here. And as you come back to this region, you can really see what's happening. It's just back and forth, back and forth. And we've seen this a number of times before. Now in Discord, I basically took one trade this morning, and then after that, I was done. I said, this was it for me. I'm not trading at all. It's just not worth it. And basically going into this morning at 10:50, said, here we are trending on the Nasdaq, essentially all futures. I said, it's just going to keep happening over and over. Essentially, you're right there. Now, what happened from that level on Discord? You came right back down, chopping, chopping, chopping. I just have no interest here. If you're trading this, you're really playing Russian roulette with what's going to happen tomorrow with that data. Now, you're also saying, Tyler, well, you're not confident anymore in the data. You're not confident in that we're going into a bear market. Technically, you are not in a bear market yet. So I have to clarify that for anyone that's watching because people are getting very mad with some of the content that I've been making. We've already gone over this as well. But looking at where you're at, I still think there is downside. I still think there's key indicators we're trying to get into that are pointing to more downside. But as far as the data that's being released, we have to look at what's happening and how they keep releasing it. We had an inflation report on Friday, which everyone would have assumed that inflation was continuing to rise. But they came out and said that it was slowing down. And I don't really believe half the things that are being told to us from our Fed, from our presidency, from our government. I just don't believe that part of it. However, I'm playing it by ear with all these data releases, and the safest thing to do is just wait for the releases to come out and then trade based on that data. For instance, if we go back to Friday, what happened? You got that data release saying that inflation was slowing down, you chopped, and at the end of the day, you had that monster explosion. That's how you should have traded. Going into here, I'm not going to trade this key support and resistance zone. I thought you were going to get an instant break, and I was pretty greedy this morning and took a small loss there. Only trade today was a loss. But I'm just to the point now where I'm just like, let us get out of this zone. Let's see what happens. If you break above the weekly 1214, then I'm going to trade to the upside. If you get below 1203, then I'm going to trade to the downside. It's really that simple, right? So in this zone right here, I want to make it very clear, I'm not interested in getting any trades. Why? Because you're just chopping in the zone. It's very slow, stagnant movement. However, let's say you get some upside pressure and you break through, get a retest. I'm looking to trade the continuation on that retest. But let's say by some chance you get downside and tomorrow the data comes out bad, like we kind of expect. We expect bad consumer data coming out, right? Then I want to see downside and I want to continue to trade that downside. And I'm looking for puts or however I'm trying to short the market from the downside from that play. But in this zone, it's just not worthwhile. I've gone over all that data as well in Discord, going over just the value of puts and how they're just not really getting the worth, right? So for instance, of looking at something like Tesla, this was a very interesting play. If you were in Discord and you saw it as well, you came down to this support zone down here at 730 and you bounced about $6-7 to the upside. However, on the contracts right at the money, you only made $200. I'm not trying to trade Tesla for $6-7 and only make $200 on the back end of it. It's just not worth it for me personally. So even something like Tesla, extremely volatile, is moving very slowly. Now, if we look at something like Apple and some of these other main names, they're moving very slowly throughout the day to the upside, but near the end of the day, you're seeing more and more downside creeping in here. However, it's just not that big. Looking at the chart, you might say, look, you're getting decent movement, but you're barely moving about $1 to the downside right here. And again, that is not going to make you money in this market right now. So again, for me, it's just a patience game, waiting for data to be released and playing it by ear. Now, again, if you break below this region, this 12,000 region, which I can say that 1203 isn't the major level, but I want to see new lows being made. And so if you get below this key area, you have lots of room back down to locally 11.8, 11.9 in a hurry. So that's where I'd be looking to trade it to the downside and trading stocks to that downside indeed. Now, something I want to look at is going to be the 10-year yield. And this is something that's pretty interesting as well. Now, even though today's been pretty slow and sideways, you can see that the yield is going incredibly to the upside and you're getting a bounce from this zone. You go over to the 1 hour chart and you can see what's going on here. Shockingly similar movement, people. Shocking, shocking, shocking. You're getting the same type of flag. What happened back here? The last time you had any type of bounce, you flagged, and then what happened? Boom, you shopped to new highs. What's happening here? You're flagging. I wonder what's going to happen. Are you going to push to new highs? We'll have to wait and see. Looking at the US 10-year conversion over to the US 30 for that complete inverted flip. It's going back up to 97%. The same type of price action, people. Nothing is changing, except this time it looks a little bit stronger than it did back here. Back here, it kind of continued for a while, then going down. But right here, down, down, down. It's trying to get a push back to the upside. Also on the DXY, the dollar index. What's happening here? The dollar's finding support. Remember, when the dollar is strong, what happens? Typically, it is a risk-off market. The dollar goes up, stocks typically go down. These are just what's happening on the market and how it's moving right now. So again, I am not biased. I have no positions right now. I'm just looking at what's happening here, and you're just slowly chopping down. Now, I have alerts. Some of them are going off. As you can see here, you are pushing to trying to get to new lows. You just can't quite get there and you keep finding support. Now, when we go over to Bookmap, this is where things get interesting, and you can see there is a lot of liquidity and a lot of buy walls here, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But ultimately, what's happening here? If you look, and we're actually going to get rid of these hidden iceberg orders. We have no interest in those. There's not very many happening today. You're seeing, yes, you're chopping back and forth, very sideways action. You can see very clearly this is a very sideways trend on ES. About a 30-point up and down movement all day. Very small. Looking at the volume, though, it's been decreasing all day. In my opinion, I don't think you're seeing too many buyers stepping in right now because they're waiting for that data release tomorrow. But you're also seeing people do have orders in here, and they're trying to hold it around this 3,900 range. Very interesting as well. That's what I'm saying. This is not a trade zone for me. So like you saw, you got knocked out of this area at the 3,900 where a lot of orders were. You had a lot of lots, around 1,000 were sitting here total. You broke below it. You actually took it out, and then they came back in to reestablish that line. So buyers are still stepping in, trying to hold that 3,900. That's going to be a very interesting point. Again, we have 2 hours left in the day, so you could easily break down from this. But just looking at it right now, I'm stepping away from the charts. I don't want to trade this. It's just setting myself up for failure and create trade opportunities that are not in the best risk to reward ratio for myself. Now going over to Cheddar Flow, what I want to look at is a SPY and just give you a demonstration of what's happening. You're sitting, again, there's no real one side winning here on puts to calls. There's bulls, bears, it's all the same right now in my opinion. A 1.2 ratio, very even. We've typically been seeing this very much shaded over to the put side, but we're seeing a lot of equality here on both of these as well. Going over to Qs, again, 1.1, there's nothing really crazy happening here. And even on this movement, something that we've been looking at, something like VIX. VIX has been going down today. You filled that gap back down to the downside, and there's really, again, been nothing happening here as well. So all these point to me, in my opinion, there's a lot of buyers sitting on the sideline and they're waiting for a key decision coming out based on this data and how our consumers reacting to the market, and then as well as GDP, which GDP is going to be major based on some of the reports we were getting saying that inflation, quote unquote, is dying, and it's kind of dying, quote unquote, down. So those are all things we have to be looking at. And as I look at this, it's just a very big point of, I think people are trading this and they're just getting really killed inside this chop. And again, when it's chopping like this, there's no reason to force trades, people. You will come to a movement to where you start to get out of this chop and it gets more volatile, and that's the time to play. Again, I love to use this as an example because this is how you make money in the market. You let the chop go. Once it breaks from out of the chop, guess what happens? You trade it to the downside or you trade it to the upside. There's no reason to get over-consumed with this. Now, in my opinion, a lot of the data points to downside. However, data was pointing back here. Again, I said the same thing. Data was pointing to downside right here. But guess what? You had some good data come out and you popped up. Once you get above that region, what happened? You started going to the next level. It was just upside movement. It was clear. Trade it to the upside once you break out of that zone. The same thing is happening here, except you're kind of chopping in a really weird area, and it's definitely able to see what's happening with buyers, and they are waiting for this data to be released. So again, investing.com, you can see all this being released, and you can actually track all of this as it is released, and you can see all the data points as well. I'm not sponsored by them. It's just absolutely free. It's very easy to, find and look at all this data as well. And you can actually see previous points as well, how you beat last time. And right now they're expecting a 100. So they're expecting that to drop pretty drastically going into this quarter, but we'll have to see exactly what happens tomorrow when this is released. But in clarification, let me give you exactly what I'm looking for on the Nasdaq and exactly what I'm looking for on the S&P. So as we get in here to the Nasdaq, what am I looking for? If you break below this level, if you get down here, what do I see is happening? Where do I see is going? I want to be very, very clear. I'm looking for a retest, most likely of this area right here, back to around 11,875, down to 11,812, 11,8 flat. That's where I would see you coming. So if you break down this region, I would anticipate downward movement coming into here. That's what I would see happening. You break down this, and then you're looking for even weaker levels all the way down previous to those levels around 11.7, 11.5. We'd have to talk about that when it happens. If you break to the upside, what do I see happening? So let's say you get up tomorrow, you start pushing back up, you get above the weekly. Where do I see you going? I see you most likely retesting 12.3, 12.27. This is going to be a very difficult region to get above because you do have quite a bit of area to get into this region. So if you come back to this region, you can come all the way back over here and see you trended in this area between 12.2 flat all the way up to around 12.35, 12.37. So you have a lot of resistance up here, but I see you chopping in this range. And if you get above this range, that's where we become bullish and you look crazy to go all the way back to 12.8. But we have to talk about that when we get back to that point.